gonna do? The old rain is always on the sea. They will still always bring you to life, singing. So get ready, ready, ready. Get ready, don't feel they come.
All right, welcome aboard, everybody. Manchild Show with Boy Green Digital at MC Show Digital, our handle on YouTube. Don't forget, click that subscribe button and become part of our growing community. We're talking NBA hoops today. We do it every week with our NBA insider. Let's welcome him. It's Sean Deveney. What's up, Sean? How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We're doing well. Today's broadcast, by the way, brought to you by our friends at Bayberry Automotive, integrity in everything. And I always like to take a little peek at the standings before we get together, Sean, just to see where everybody is, you know, because we've got a Celtic guy here to my left, and then we've got me here in the center of the Knicks, and Sean, you're Mr. Objective, I suppose. Do you even have a team? I don't know if I've ever asked you. Is there a team?
I grew up with the Celtics. I grew up way up in section 10 something in the old Boston Garden, which our seats, when we would get seats, my dad had a couple friends who had season tickets, so we'd sometimes get their seats. We would look down at the rafters. So we were higher up than the rafters. You could see the rats in the old garden walking across the rafters where we used to sit. But that's what I grew up with. Yeah.
That's not a bad history to grow up with, as much as I hate them. All right, but I don't hate them right now because they're behind us by half a game in the standings. I mean, we are very early here in the NBA standings. Are what you see in the standings, both in the East and the West right now, you know, kind of what you think, or are there some kind of, there to say, you know, some dark horses here that are going to all of a sudden pop? Like, I was looking, and I'm so surprised at where the Cavaliers stand at the moment, a team that was so dominant last year in the East. So are there a couple of teams that are, they're just lollygagging right now, but you're going to expect to see them, you know, certainly in the top 3 or 4 come the end of the year?
Yeah, you know, I mean, certainly Cleveland is a big surprise. I think even Milwaukee, you know, everybody knew that what they were going through and all the stuff with Giannis, but they're a better team than what they've shown. And you know, they've got some things that they could possibly do in terms of the trade deadline. So you know, that's another team that I think is better than what they've shown. But you know, yeah, Cleveland would be the big surprise. You know, out west, there's certainly been some teams. You know, we've seen some good basketball from the Warriors, for instance, and then we've seen some terrible basketball from the Warriors. They've got this Jonathan Kuminga thing sort of hanging over them. I think once they resolve that, maybe they bring in another player, that they'll be a team that could potentially shoot up as well. But yeah, you know, I mean, there's certainly been some surprises on the other side too. You know, are the Pistons this good? That's a big question for me. You know, I'm still not 100% sure. The Spurs in the West, as they've slipped a little bit lately, but you know, are I think they've arrived earlier than even they thought they would. So you know, how legitimate are they? So I think there's probably more questions for me. At the top, are some of those teams going to come down rather than teams that are lower, possibly shooting up?
So with that being said, Sean, let's talk about Detroit. Like, what a remarkable turnaround. They're the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. That's spectacular. And you just look at their history, and I was just glancing over the last bunch of years of 14 wins, 17 wins, 23 wins, 20 wins, 20 wins. Like, there's been a gap of suckage that has taken place here. You know, last year, of course, above 500, get to the playoffs, all that stuff. But, like, they've obviously reached another level. What is the secret sauce of this Detroit Pistons evolution and turnaround in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty remarkable because I think you watching them in the playoffs last year, you could see that what this team's identity was. You know, that this is a sort of a tough guy team, and they're going to throw some elbows. You know, maybe not reminiscent of the old Bad Boys, but certainly you know, a team that has that element to it. I think J.B. Bickerstaff was kind of a cast-off coach from the Cavaliers. You know, he's been really, really terrific in terms of, you know, getting these guys to play a certain way. You know, Cade Cunningham being healthy. I mean, he was not healthy the first couple of years of his career. We saw a lot of flashes from him, but, you know, him getting healthy and really getting his feet under him, that's really been a real big key for them. Jalen Duren, I don't think anybody saw him being as good as he is. He's a guy who can do a little bit of everything and does bring that toughness and does bring that that to the floor, but also brings talent. And that's the thing. You can have all the tough guys you want. You're not going to win very many games if they can't also play basketball. And I think a guy like Duren, he's a perfect example of a guy who can do that.
Sean, Paul and I were talking before we started the video with you today about SGA and OKC and what they have turned into. They are a monster. They are the best team in the NBA. They have a championship ring now to prove it. They might have a couple more by the time this thing is all said and done. The thing that scares me the most, though, is not that, they've become a monster here for the moment. It's that they might become a monster for all time. And that's because of what that trade was. I just went back and looked at the details of the trade. I thought the Mikal Bridges trade was crazy for the Knicks. But listen to this trade, okay? They got the Clippers got Paul George in the trade, and they gave up they gave SGA, Gallinari, 5 first-round picks and 2 first-round pick swaps, all for Paul George. I mean, just Paul George straight up for SGA. They won the trade like a landslide. I mean, this is Herschel Walker-like. Is this, in terms of the NBA, the most lopsided trade in the history of the NBA? I think it's definitely a contender.
Yeah, you can certainly make that case, certainly because of what Paul George became. You got to go back and you got to give the Clippers a little bit of leeway here because they got what they wanted out of Paul George. There was a year where they looked like the team. They looked like the contender. They wind up flaming out. We know what playoff Paul wound up being. But they kind of got what they were after with this trade, at least initially. Now, everything that happened after that was absurd. You think of the Celtics trade with Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce, and they get back all those picks, become Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. That's certainly up there as well. But I would say that, this really does eclipse that just because of the number of picks and what Oklahoma City has done with those picks. And then the one player that they got winds up being an MVP, and people could see it. The other thing about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, this always confused me about that trade. I've never gotten a straight answer on this. Is that if you remember the draft when Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was coming out, he wouldn't work out for any other teams. He was working out only for the Clippers. He wanted to go to the Clippers. The Clippers wanted him badly. They really kind of sort of arranged the draft, had a lot of cloak and dagger type stuff. He wouldn't work out for the Knicks. The Knicks, had him on their board, but he wouldn't work out for them. So they said, we're not going to take him. I think that was the Kevin Knox year, if I'm not mistaken. But it's not their fault. I mean, other teams passed on him as well because he wouldn't work out for them. He wanted to go to the Clippers. And then the first chance the Clippers had to trade him for Paul George with a bunch of other stuff they did. And I never understood why the Clippers loved him so much and were so quick to trade him once they could.
Let me ask you just real quick on that, because we saw it a couple years ago, obviously in a very different way with the Bronny James situation, where there's this extracurricular activity to try to force something to happen. Why don't more NBA teams in the SGA sweepstakes we were talking about before, or again, Bronny James was just such a unique example that maybe that one deserves to be in its own category. But why does a team go, you know what? Screw you, SGA. You don't want to work out for us. We've seen enough from other stuff. We're still drafting you. Yeah, suck it, pal. You're going to be here, and then let's call the bluff and see if he just never shows up for a team and what happens with draft rights and all those things. So, why don't more teams do that? Why don't more teams call the bluff?
Yeah, it's a good question. A lot of teams have relationships with the agents and they don't want to sour that, and so they kind of there's a notion that there'll be some back scratching, some quid pro quo, but yeah, I do think more teams should say, once we have your rights for 4 years, and so if you want to play in the NBA, that's the way the draft works. And certainly we've seen that, and there have been teams. I mean, look, I think back to go way back to Ricky Rubio, who did not want to play for Minnesota, didn't want to play for Sacramento, all these other teams, and tried to finagle his way to different places. and eventually the Timberwolves said, "Heck with that, we're taking you," and they did. So there are examples of teams doing that, but I do think that sometimes teams let themselves get agented around too much. Heck with the agents, pick the player you want.
It's the Manchild Show with Boy Green Digital. We're talking with Sean Deveney from Heavy.com, our NBA insider. Today's broadcast brought to you by our friends at Bayberry Automotive. Let's just take 30 seconds, learn a little bit more about our friends from Bayberry.
Integrity is a word that some people just throw around in life. But at Bayberry Automotive, integrity is everything. Integrity of their mechanics, who are all experienced and certified. Integrity in the work they perform, with nothing but 5-star reviews from satisfied customers on Google. Integrity that goes along with family, a family-run business that treats you like one of their own. Integrity in everything. Bayberry Automotive. BayberryAutomotive.com.
Located on Route 57 across from Bayberry Plaza, the premier choice for auto repair in Liverpool.
All right, we're back. Manchild Show with Boy Green Digital. Don't forget, at MC Show Digital, our handle on YouTube. You can pop that subscribe button and be part of our growing family. You see the link right there on the screen. We're talking NBA with Sean Deveney, and let's talk about the only team that matters in the NBA, and that's my New York Knickerbockers. Jalen Brunson, a little bit banged up with an ankle injury, may have to miss a game here. The Knicks, who started so hot, then kind of hit a lull. It seems like they're starting to find it again, Sean. I think one of the things that a lot of Knicks fans are wondering about right now is, with the trade deadline kind of less than a month away, will the Knicks make a move here? Certainly, Gershon Yabusele, if I'm saying his name right, he's done so little for the Knicks, I don't even know how to say his name properly, could be on the trade block. Is there a target out there for my Knicks? And kind of give me your, it's not quite mid-season, but your close to midterm report on the New York Knicks.
Yeah, so there's no question that they're going to look for another big guy. That, the whole thing with Mitchell Robinson and what they're trying to do really only works if you've got someone else. If you've got Isaiah Hartenstein, would be nice, but of course, that's not out there. So they need somebody to kind of fill that role, who can come in and be a starting quality center, give them defense and rebounding. I think a name that I like a lot for them. Look, they're very limited in terms of what they can offer and what they can take back, the apron and all that stuff. There's really have to thread a needle to get anything done here. But Robert Williams from the Blazers, of course, was had those great years with the Celtics. Very injury prone, and you're probably not going to get 100% out of him. But if you can take 50% from Robinson and 50% from Williams, you wind up with a pretty good center. And I think that's the kind of thing that they're going to have to do, because if you're just going to try to swap Yabusele for another center, you're not going to get somebody who's going to be you're going to get Precious again. You're going to get somebody along those lines, and they need somebody better than that. So I think they have to take a flawed player back. An injury-prone player like Robert Williams, I think he'd be, to me, the ideal guy. But, yeah, I think that's really the big thing that they need. And the other thing is just Karl Anthony Towns. I don't know what's going on with this guy. If you watched the game last night, Mike Brown talked about it after the game. He falls down, and about half an hour later, decides to get up and come down the floor. There's just something going on there. They're asking him to play defense and rebound, and he is acting like they're asking him, to become, an AI engineer or something. Like it's as if they're asking him to do something completely foreign to him, and it's pretty strange. They want him to play defense and rebound, and for some reason. I shouldn't say for some reason, right? Because this has been the story of his career. Plenty of coaches have asked him to play defense and rebound, and he hasn't done it. Credit to Mike Brown, because he's sticking with it. I think that, to me, is the big issue right now with them, is what happens with Karl Anthony Towns. How does this play out throughout the rest of the year?
And what about my Celtics, Sean? Let's get to the real team that matters here, okay? And let's put it all aside. Joe Mazzulla should be freaking coach of the year with what he's doing with this group. No Jason Tatum, everyone left this team for dead, and yet now all of a sudden they're still in this conversation. So it's an interesting line to toe, because Tatum is unavailable, and maybe he'll be available at some other point. If you have any update on that, sure, feel free. So that's an interesting line to toe ahead of this trade deadline of what to do one direction or the other, as you're waiting for Tatum to eventually come back to this team, whether that's it's this season or next season. What is that line, and what are the moves to be made if there are moves to be made?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be. I think you get a lot of speculation. I heard Jaren Jackson Jr. That's not happening. That's not happening. This is a team that has just dug itself out of salary cap hell, the luxury tax, the aprons, and all that stuff. They've just dug themselves out. They're not going to go and get a $50 million a year player to put themselves right back in that. So that's that. If they do something, it's not going to be a big time move. It's going to be something small. Something to help them with their depth. But yeah, look, their big thing is waiting on Tatum. Probably not in February. I saw somewhere that there was speculation about February. I can't imagine that happening. They're going to be careful. There's not a guy who rushed back, no matter how well you're playing. So probably mid-March is where I would target, so he can get ready for that stretch run and perhaps work himself into that rotation and into that lineup by the playoffs. That's the big thing, is being patient, but having him ready for the playoffs and having him be a pretty good contributor at that point.
So quick follow on that. So it is legitimate that Jason Tatum returning this season is totally in the cards. Again, not immediately, not the February stuff, but like returning and being a piece for the playoffs is legitimately on the table.
I would say they're planning on it. I would say that they are planning on Jason Tatum playing. Again, they're not going to, if they get to March and the strength, they have all these things they do, certain thresholds they have to meet along the way. If the strength isn't there, even if it's, 89%, they're going to say that's not enough and you're not coming back. But they feel like the progress that he's made has been such that he should be able to play at some point in March. If it's February, I'll be shocked. But March, I think, is realistic for him.
Yeah, well, we don't have any problem with that team in the playoffs anyway. So what's the big worry when it all comes down to it? With a healthy Tatum, we got the job done last year now, didn't we, Boy Green?
Well, you didn't. He got injured in the middle of the play. What are you talking about? Okay. It's tainted. There's an asterisk. Obviously.
Down 3-1, right? He got injured down 3-1. Otherwise, they were about to turn it around.
That's it.
Two other quickies I have for you, Sean. One, are the Clippers for real? I mean, they have surged recently. Old man, the beard, James Harden, saying he believes they can climb their way all the way back into this race. What are your thoughts on the Clippers at this point?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I do think that they have played more like what they thought they would, but I just think that they were so far behind. They were, 6-18 or something like that, 6-19. It's too much of a gap to make up. You could possibly get into that play-in tournament, and that's all you really need to do. But you get into that play-in tournament, and then you're facing Oklahoma City in the first round, and forget it. They're playing much better. I think getting rid of Chris Paul has helped. That he was a negative impact on that team. I think Ty Lue is coaching more comfortably. I think everybody's playing more comfortably, and that's all been good. But I think there's a ceiling on how far they can get. It's hard to see them getting much over, much more than 42-40. Maybe 43 wins, and that'll get you into the play-in tournament at best. And once you're there, it's hard to see them winning a playoff series.
And that was my quick comment, Sean, because on one hand, you're like, whoa, baby. The Clippers won 4 in a row. They've won 11 of their past 13. That's the best record in the NBA during that span. I'm like, cool. So where are they at in the standings? 11th. So like they did all that incredible, awesome stuff just to not be quite in the conversation yet. And it seems more likely than not, if we're playing the odds, that they won't be able to keep up that torrid pace. So no, but that's the part that sort of intrigues me.
And they're old. I mean,
right.
Yeah, they're old. So they've kind of like they've put their best push forward. It's hard to see them. They had the big trip to whenever it's award season. They go on the road as well. So it's going to be tough for them. It does benefit them that I think the Grizzlies are probably going to take a step backward. So that might open up that 10th spot. But it's hard to see them getting much higher than 10th. Teams like Phoenix have been so good. You've got mentioned the Warriors are probably going to do something at the trade deadline. I can't see them passing them. Portland has played pretty well, given they've got some really nice young players there. I don't think Portland's going to give up their spot. So, maybe the Clippers can get in because the Grizzlies won't hold on, but I don't see them, really surpassing many of the teams in front of them.
Last time we chatted, we talked about the youngster Victor Wembanyama. I want to take a moment here, Sean, to talk about another youngster. He was the number 1 overall draft pick this past year, ended up going to the Dallas Mavericks, and that's Cooper Flagg. What are your early season returns here on the rookie?
I think he's actually been in a pretty good position. He came in and the expectation was that was going to be a contender, that, they'd get Kyrie Irving back, they'd have Anthony Davis, and Klay Thompson is still there. I was worried, and I know there were some people with the organization and people in his camp who were worried that, him jumping into a contender, that the expectations were going to be too high and that it wouldn't give him any time to really, he's 18 years old. I think he just turned 19? He's so young, and that was going to be too much too soon. The fact is that they stink. Obviously Kyrie hasn't come back, and Anthony Davis has barely played, and Cooper Flagg did get off to a rough start, but that's probably good for him. At this point is to be a little bit under the radar, to be in a situation where he's not constantly the focus. And what we've seen is that he's played better and better and better as things have gone on. I think that team is still a mess. Who knows what happens with Anthony Davis? Who knows what happens with Kyrie? I think they'll try to trade Klay Thompson if they can. At this point, maybe Daniel Gafford as well. I think they're going to try to, gather up some assets. I think they're fine with being bad this year, because this year is an important point about Dallas. This year is the last year they control their own draft pick for like the next 4 or 5 years after that, because they've done so much trading that they owe draft picks. So they're fine with being bad this year, because that's going to help them in this year's draft. After that, they want to start really kicking things into gear or collecting some draft assets. So it's still a mess of a team, but I think that's probably not been bad for him.
All right, fair enough. Sean Deveney, always good to catch up and talk NBA with you. Thanks for carving out a little time for us this week. We'll chat with you again next week.
Okay, thanks, guys.